Hello and welcome to the Bcamp podcast. I am Richard Carey, the host, and today we have with us James Oliverio, who is the founder and CEO of IdeaBox. So thank you for joining us today, James.
Great, welcome. Thanks for letting me join. I appreciate it.
And to get started, James, can you tell us a little bit about IdeaBox?
Sure. IdeaBox is a combination of a lot of companies that I've owned in the prior, but it was a brand of a company I purchased many years ago. So my career started on Wall Street as a tech person, and I grew up into a CIO-ship, and then that was the I would call the corporate career, and then I went out and started a couple of companies which were managed services companies, and I always kept the brand of IdeaBox. So I sold one of my MSPs back in 2015, and I decided to resurrect the brand. And instead of on the operational side, I decided to go on the security side. So IdeaBox today is, think of us as fractional CISOs, advisors. I call us the fixers. We do board presentations, work with boards of directors, how they should really deal with or prepare themselves for how do I get my companies prepared if there's a breach, right? Which are the things I should be thinking about as a board member? So it started there where we started getting into what other things we can do. So I do have a portfolio of services in the security lane only, which, 24/7 SOC and the rest. One of the things that why we found with IdeaBox in this journey the last couple of years is being an uptime person and with my career of managing other people's. I decided to take a program offered by Harvard in 2018, 2019 timeframe on managing information risk. I figured this thing popped up, joined this program. It was about a 4-month program, and it was a non-technical program, managing in the information age, right? And we really, in that program, took apart major breaches, Sony, Target, Equifax. Because at the point in time, I was always questioning myself, there are no key performance indicators on how do you approach, am I doing well with cyber? And I said to myself, why are these companies being breached? And they got all this great tech and great people. I had the luxury of both private sector and my MSP. My clients got breached. We had to deal with it, okay? We did our best. So in this program, we took about those breaches, and they were designing a concept around, and something I learned, something I use today, called ROM, not ROI. ROM is return on mitigation, explaining the ROI of cyber. And I said, that was one aha moment. The other is because as we're analyzing these breaches, there are two characteristics on every major breach that occurred back in the rearview mirror and still occur today. Most companies don't understand the quantity or quality of the data that's unstructured. And when they get a breach, when a breach forensics come in, they don't realize how much data was all out there and the quantification piece of it. 2, separations of duties. The IT guys are the guys with root admin rights. They're operating and securing. You can't really secure and operate. Something's going to distract you. Hence, and on major breaches like Sony, Target, Equifax, all those elevated rights of the operators, they ignored alerts, even though I had responsibility over it, right? But the data piece always had me. So I went on this quest, and during that journey, my social media presence, I became a senior advisor of a company called Actifile. They had reached out, and here's the story. 2.5 years ago, they reached out and said, we love your story of ROM, and we could do the following things for you. Quantify sensitive data, no matter where it's at. Show the use of it, who's touching it, what applications, where it's going. Look for insider threats, looking for data leakage. And with a click of a mouse, no end user involvement, preemptively protect that data with no end user involvement. I went, baloney, you can't do that. This is really true, right? So James, trust me, try it. So they show me this demonstration. I take an agent, I throw it up, and up pops on my machine, because I put it on my machine, $27 million of risk. I went, what's on my machine? Apparently this technology went through and ripped through all my folders. It was a Dropbox link that was my attorney's. And in that link was not my data he shared of every merger and acquisition and other sensitive data deal that we were looking at over a 20-year history. And the light bulb went off and went, somebody built a platform that does this? My first reaction, got off that call with Actifile, called my attorney and said, Brian, do you know those files are sitting out there that I have links to? Get rid of that data. He goes, why? Bankruptcies, credit checks, health proxies on employees. Why do we have this? He goes, well, those are the companies we're looking at. If a threat actor would have come in and steal that, we have liability. And that started my Actifile journey. So long story short, I introduced the current president to the co-founders of this Israeli-based company out of over at Israel. In the last 2 years, the go-to-market strategist, Bill Falk, who was a former expat of Kaseya and Datto, joined about a year and a half ago. And I partnered up and work with Bill on a regular basis. But Bill's steering the ship globally on the go-to-market strategy, which is through the channel through the MSPs, PAX 8, and other big VARs, okay? My role, key evangelist, I've got my own fractional CISO service where, call me the fixer, when my companies have issues, I deal with that. That's always going to remain, but my passion has been to spread the word that for anybody in the security side, you can make it a safer world for you and your clients and reduce your risk. Hence, return on mitigation, improve it, right? So I've been on this quest of the why I'm doing this, because I want to make it a safer world, right? I operated tech in my private practice for brands of companies that were makers of the Snuggie Topsy-Turvy blanket, All-Star Marketing, Alere Health, major investment banks that became my clients from my days on Wall Street. Those bankers went out and started their companies. They brought us in to manage their tech. So I'm passionate about what we do. I think there's not just a single point solution for cyber. It's about creating culture, awareness, and it's a constantly always on. But with Actifile, there's nothing else out there like it because it's a single pane of glass. I get excited about it every day because I talk to customers on a regular basis out that how do you protect something when you don't know if it's there or not? Actifile is always the word Actifile. Actifile. Files are coming in and out. Do they meet a particular criteria? Can you tag it and make a decision on it? So I know I kind of spoke a lot, but that's the whole pitch.
I love that story as well as the idea of return on mitigation. And what it makes me think is a lot of this has to do with sort of your mindset of how you think about security. And my initial reaction when I think about security, I might be alone, but I might not, is like it's super painful and it's going to slow me down and I'll think about it tomorrow. But I like that return on mitigation just puts this in a really clear perspective that you need to be thinking about this as much as you're
Yeah,
thinking about your sales pipeline.
right. I try to put the parameters around when you're running a business, when you're doing anything, you put some parameters around it, right?
Hmm.
Financially, you look at the past and the future, right? What are our numbers and did you meet those thresholds? But when it comes to cyber, you can put a plan together, but most organizations today still haven't gotten there and we can help them get there really quick. What am I protecting? What's coming in and out? So in a typical scenario, right? Cyber is really, it's not sexy, but it's a necessary thing and compliance and are driving it. But if you're a business of any kind, I don't care what size, Actifall belongs there because it's constantly going to tell you what's coming in and out, and then you can make a decision. So here's a couple of case studies, really simple. Small 8-person firm, we ran our agents out there, up pops a dashboard, and we show them top KPIs. Here are your top classifiers. You've got Social Security, X, Y, and Z that rank in the dollar amount. Don't be fixated with the dollar amount, but let's go there. Here are your top users with data associated with it. Here are the top applications that are interacting with that data. They go, data, data, data. What's that data? We can't see the data. We can't see the contents of the data because it's built with confidentiality in mind. Pull these records. You tell us what's in it. They go, that's my tax return. That's my sales and marketing. Oh, that's this, that's that. Yeah, but isn't that protected? Yes, it's behind a firewall, but let's play it out. With every breach that occurred, threat actors get in some way, copy that data. That's what we hear. Send you a note, pay me $5 million for your data back, right? Now with Actifile, not only do we quantify it, tell you where it's at, with a click of a mouse, if they were to do that, they stole data like going into a bank with the money packs. As soon as they go out, that thing explodes, the money's useless, right? In this case, they can't get to the money. They can't get to your data. So we preemptively protect that. No other product in the market does that. But to get there, companies, to the main point, which is you should always know where you are as a business. This is a really key indicator. Now, there's other indicators other than the data piece, right, that we put in our equation about what you're doing with firewalls and how you're training your users and events that are going on, people attacking and coming into your space, and the things that you and the measures you take. And there's a cross section of your costs, etc. But the data piece is the red herring in this whole equation that Actifile is bringing to light. Quickly, when we go into companies that know nothing about Actifile or may have a chip on their shoulder going, I don't know why we spend all this money on tech, right? So you don't? So let's tell you why. If you let us run a calculations, we'll come back to you. And this has happened. Why are we spending $16 million on all this tech for our business? Let us come in and do an assessment. 4 weeks later, we come back and says, based on the data you have in your systems, your third-party agreements, we're looking at the calculations, the data that's put you at risk at $600 million. We can't see the data, but this is what it's telling us, right? Here's what you should go look at. They go pull the records, and they're going through it. Executive compensation, stock options, all these records and spreadsheets, where they're tied to. We're showing them all the knowledge workers. And then along the way, one of the IT people going, why does the person in shipping have a copy of our executive compensation? I don't know. Why don't you go find out? True story. They go find out they were pumping data, and the guy in shipping was insider trading. Who's selling stock inside the company? These are true stories. And
Wow.
Actifile was able to unearth that and show the audit trail of when the file went, when it was taken, and when it was opened and closed. There's more and more coming. So Actifile, in my heart of hearts, this time next year and the year after, we're talking about millions and millions of seats in production. Because it's a model where it's like an antivirus agent. You stick it side by side with it. It belongs on every desktop, Mac, or Linux.
Yeah, that's interesting. And one of the questions that comes to mind for me is we hear about these big data breaches that hit the news and stuff like that. I'm curious, do you have a sense for how often do you get that scenario that you just talked about, where maybe it's not a public data breach, but somebody penetrates, steals some data, and then tries to get you to pay for
All
it,
the
or you have an employee that's leaking
It's
data
all
or
the
something
time,
like.
but there's two types of or ahas, right? There's intentional and unintentional. Let's
Hmm.
talk about the unintentional. Real simple. I'm working on executive compensation with stock options. Have the file set. James is the CEO. I send it. 5 minutes later, I go, oh my God, that's my buddy who I play golf with. And my email dropped down. I didn't send the list to my buddy, to my CEO. In a perfect world without Actifile, my buddy's got a copy of the list, right? Am I going to report that? Probably not. But companies I see all in all, when they're drop down or on their phone, because the last person they email or similar name, they just attach and leak the information. In an Actifile full world where you've deemed that you've got this data and you're going to keep it protected, even in the I made a mistake, because Actifile is encrypted, that person who opens it doesn't have the agent to open it. So they get unreadable. That's one example, right? The other is when you're looking in the platform and you live in it and make it part of your day-to-day as part of your ecosystem, you can see what data is moving and where and make decisions around it. And look for shadow IT, look for applications that are necessary. So it becomes part of your kit in tech, but it does belong in the security lane.
Yeah, interesting. What advice would you give to like a developer who's maybe working on a database for the company or.
There's, I, where do I begin? Okay, especially when it comes to development. It's culturally. If you're not, before you even touch a stitch of code, you've got to go in with security first thinking. Okay? So when you're coding, all right, you got to be thinking about cybersecurity is not about an event beginning, middle, and end. It's cultural. Okay? It's something you have to go into with a cultural aspect of it. So when you focus in that way, then you start thinking about controls, and there are frameworks like NIST and HITRUST where there are protocols for developers that if I was developing, bone up and learn about those studies on how change management, change controls, where you develop in a container and how you do things. Because sometimes you change one bit of code and you open up the door. This is what major companies deal with. And they've got reams and reams. If you're a developer, you must take this seriously and bone up on those skill sets before you even touch a piece of code. And it's already spelled out through those frameworks. There's lots of things and reference materials that you can pull down. You know, if I'm a developer, it's going to tell them all about security first and some of the things they can do in practice and make that. Because when they're in change management meetings and people want to do things, wait a minute, there's a process, change management process. We have to do it this way. We have to isolate code and work in a different manner, and then put those measures against to make sure that you haven't opened up a hole with your code.
Yep. And I guess similar related to that question is what kind of advice would you give to somebody who wants to get in and like be a work full time in security? What types of challenges are you seeing that you think will be relevant and roles that meet those challenges?
I think breaking into a sector where people think you have to have a background in it, you have to have a passion first, I believe. And there's lots of materials that if you're just starting out, you know, it's all things security today in the tech sector. So I think there's a lot of programs and offerings for people just starting out, whether you want to become a SOC engineer or learn about it. The program I went through was more of a holistic, looking top down, non-tech approach, which shined a big light on all the big issues, right, at a high level. And I don't think you start there. You start, especially if you're new coming into the industry or transitioning into the sector, you know, it's such broad, it's always changing. But what's not changing is the characteristics of what a cyber breach is. It's operational, reputational, and legal compliance risks. Those are the three risks, the pyramid of it. It's operational, like I said, because operationally brings you down. There's legal compliance in most cases. And the reputation piece, again, somewhat of a red herring, right? Which is most organizations, how do you buy back goodwill, right? So if I'm a company today and I have no program in place, you're already on the bottom of the curve. But if you're a company that has frameworks, you separated your operations from your security function, you have a culture, you have a written goals document that you're going to protect your company, you're going to protect your employees' confidential information, your customers' confidential information, and your credo is cultural based with vision, then all the other pieces fall in place. What do you think which company gets called in on a legal case? The one that says, oh, I bought a cyber risk policy, that was enough? Or the one that says, we got culture, we train our people, we got a written document in our policy manual, we train our users quarterly, treat this very seriously, we sign our third-party agreements because when they send us their patents and trademarks, we secure it and keep it. We got the best measures. You think that company, the one who gets dragged into the mud pit saying, well, Your Honor, we did everything we could, they're going to have less liability to the one that goes, we bought a cyber risk policy. That was enough. So you got two ends of the spectrum coming through.
I love the comparing just trying to buy the problem away versus actually like getting in good security shape.
I can't tell you how many conversations. Oh, we've got coverage. We got policy. I'm going, okay. And they're coming down. You just don't have to be just a regulated business. It's any business today, right? It's just common sense, which sometimes is not so common.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I have one more question, which is I'd be curious. You mentioned this course you took at Harvard, which is super cool. And I'm curious just to hear your experience. Like, what are some of your best or maybe worst experiences in your own education?
That was one of the best ones, believe it or not, because I have a master's in telecommunications and engineering from Polytech and my undergrad at St. John's, okay?
Hmm.
That was one of them. And teaching an old dog new tricks. I'm 60 years old, okay? I went through this program a couple of years ago. It was an eye opener. They just teach differently. It was a lot of reading, a lot of writing, not theory. It's like challenged you saying, what do you think occurred here? And I'm talking Sony, Target, Equifax, the NSA, major breaches. A lot of material. It was intense. It was much more the workload than I expected. And the networks, we actually did tabletop exercises, which are examples of if a breach occurred in a hypothetical,
Hmm.
right? With 40, 50 people on a call. I happened to get invited into a large medical facility live. It deals with, and the tabletop exercise of that one was like, wow, this is really an eye opener. This is what they're thinking about what happened. Here was the scenario. This one particular heavily big thing, and this was why that educational program was, to put a bow on this, I felt was so great. Got to experience what a real live big hospital group was concerned about an injection of a record changing inside a database that says Richard's blood type was a different blood type and we're operating on a different limb when your procedure came in. And their protocols were, and now I understand when sometimes when you go in, they keep asking you many questions, they tag and write on the limb they're going to operate, and they keep asking, don't they have my records? Don't they have my records? They want to make sure, trust but verify. They've got the single source, which is you going in for the operation. And you say, yes, that's it. Because then they go back to the database to see if anybody accidentally manipulated it or threat actors went in and put the wrong stuff in there. That was the tabletop exercise. Because think about it. If there was a breach and they changed a lot of the patient's records, there's a lot of liability where lives would be lost. My eyes went like this, bing. I went, wow, that's not the whole system down. That was really profound. And I go, well, from that, and my other experiences in education, education is it's very valuable. You need it. But, I came up the sector really quick. My undergrad on Wall Street, that bank took off. When you have to go start a business, I hired myself coaches. I never read my own P&L before. Okay. You immerse yourself in it. It was one of the better decisions I made. But, yeah, I would say educationally, the last one I went through, it had a profound effect because I went back to my what I was doing with IdeaBox. It helped crystallize. I really do want to help people create a safer world.
Yeah. Wow. I love that experience. I think there's so much there of just like the work that you did and just the change in perspective that it sounds like you had from them combining your educational experience with what's going on in the real world. Just so cool.
Right.
I love that.
Because I had the operational side of keeping it up without
Hmm.
understanding how you really should look at it. Now I can separate the two. So when I look at a problem that a client has, a lot of problems are brought on by the people touching it that have
Hmm.
the elevated admin rights. And often some people, whisk things under the carpet. I mean, I do have a client right now that's going through a breach, right? Breach being they clicked on an email and they compromised credentials and they got in, okay? And this is a regular occurrence, but we've got it contained. We deal with crisis communications, incident response, but now we're going through the peel back. It's going to be weeks, but we do know we contained and we're following our frameworks and our disciplines because that company that we have for a couple of years, they wrote a culture document. They wrote a written information security plan. There is a separation of duties. So all the controls are in place. Now we're peeling it back. And again, this is data that came in from the external. We have a responsibility to contact that party because they were breached because we got the information it was a phish because it's the domino effect, right? And when you're in the medical, and what happens to be in the medical field, you have to follow those regs. Otherwise, the state of New York will slap you on the wrist and hit you with fines. So we're all over it. But this is because not only I have the luxury because I ran tech with my people. So I know how to install a server and manage the infrastructure. So it's relatable. Not many people have that. So if you're a developer coming into the industry or have some tech background, you don't have to know it all. But there are definitely lots of material and programs available for people who want to make that break in or transition into cyber because there's a lot of things that go into it. There's data analytics, there's infrastructure piece, but it all ties back to one thing for all of it: culture and goals
Hmm.
and that understanding and the terminologies. It is a different way. So that's what I would recommend if anybody came for me for advice.
James, it has been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed it.